Welcome back to the Do Tell Virtually podcast. I'm very excited about my guest today. Meredith Kaganovskiy is a certified meeting professional and a senior project manager of the DIA Global Meeting. DIA is the Drug Information Association, which has provided the world's largest global neutral stage for life sciences professionals to come together and address healthcare challenges. Their global annual meeting brings together patients, industry, regulators, and academia from all angles of the product lifecycle from more than 50 countries. Meredith is passionate about creating experiences and environments that give individuals opportunities to learn and connect with each other. Since 2004, she has designed conferences for both domestic and international nonprofit associations. She takes great pride in how she works with her volunteer planning committees and in the custom resources she creates and provides to help her session chairs and speakers prepare, which is how we got to know Meredith in helping her speakers pivot from live to virtual. I will attest from my front row seat, she is masterful at bringing the best out of very smart people who want to connect and communicate over a common cause. Meredith hails from New Jersey, where she cherishes her time with her family, and you might hear a bit of that coastal state in her accent. Please help me welcome Meredith Kaganovskiy to the Do Tell Virtually podcast. So Meredith, based on some unofficial numbers, I heard from large event production companies, and this is not scientific, but the conjecture was about 10% of those major conferences that were scheduled during COVID, which, by the way, we're having this conversation today on June 30th, when some states are actually shutting back down, that only 10% of those conferences actually decided to pivot to virtual. The rest, the 90%, just canceled or postponed, which is really one of the reasons we started this podcast, was because our clients were in that rescheduled and postponed category. So the obvious question that I want to start with today is, why did you all at the DIA decide to pivot your 6,000 person, 500 speaker conference to virtual with like 6 weeks to plan?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy when you put it that way. We did, postponing, canceling, they were on the table as well. Our meeting is a June meeting. I would say around mid-March, mid to end of March, we started having conversations that this in-person meeting may not happen. This meeting was scheduled for Washington, D.C., and we were monitoring the situation very closely. We looked at how far we were in our program planning, and by mid-March, speakers were all confirmed for the most part. We decided that the information and the knowledge sharing that happens at our meeting was too important to not happen, to not convene. When we bring stakeholders across all of the life sciences to the table, it is the perfect platform to talk about crisis such as COVID-19. And that's what we did. And so in moving the program virtually and deciding to go forward with it, it also gave us this opportunity to continue disruption and bring in or pivot on our content and bring COVID-19 to the table.
So I want to ask you a few follow-up questions, but I'm going to tuck in. I want you to think about this now from the first question from two different points of view. As it relates to the organization, the pivot that you had to make, and then also move into the pivot that your speakers had to make. So let's just talk about you first. Did you have to change up a lot of how you were structured and who did what, or did you just sort of keep picking up or keep going in the same direction and hope that your partners, your external vendors, would fill in the gaps? Just talk a little about what that felt like to you internally.
So this is the analogy I like to use for how it felt. It felt like we are a large cruise ship that was cruising through the ocean at a great pace. And then all of a sudden, I needed to turn this large cruise ship into a new direction. And so the weight of that turn was something that we had to absorb and we had to move quickly on. And we could not do it with the plans we currently had. So we had team members that were focused on with our vendors and kind of reaching out to them and saying, we're not going to be doing things this way anymore, which also meant not needing some services anymore. So we had a team that was focused on that. My team was focused on the how-to, how are we going to deliver this? And so there was a search made for an online virtual meeting platform that could become the virtual convention center for us, a place for us to have thousands of people logged into, a place where we could organize our content so folks that are familiar with our meeting would still find sessions. They would find main sessions. They would find community roundtable discussions. They would find the poster gallery. They would find the exhibit hall. Those were all components that we decided we needed to bring with us into the virtual world. And so we needed a whole new way of delivering this information. So we had to move quick to partner with a vendor. It happened to be a vendor that was already working with us, but in a much different capacity. We utilized Freeman. We utilized their online Event Pro platform. They were working with us in a general service contractor capacity. So all of our signage, for example, on
Didn't
site,
need any signage.
all of our registration desks, the exhibit hall, like that's them. And they said, hey, we have a solution that's for online. And so we went through the process of going through different virtual tours with them, demonstrations with them, and then made the switch. Come the top of April, we were moving into this direction of going with an online event platform and pouring all of our content into it. So from the staff side, it was a very big change of what resources we were working with, what vendor we were solely, for the most part, working with. But then we also had to adjust the program itself because I could not bring everything with me to the virtual. There were some session formats that would not work in a virtual setting.
Like what?
So we have one that's called Engage and Exchange. And it does not have a presentation or a speaker. It has a facilitator, and all of the learning happens at the different tables. And it's limited to 50 people. It's like a workshop. And it's peer-to-peer learning. And so we didn't have the means to translate that in the time period that we had. So we had to let go of the Engage and Exchange. We also had to let go with about 30% of our sessions within each of the 13 tracks. Just because of the short turnaround time we had on this, I needed to make sure that I could record, how much could I record? I needed to make sure that we weren't overcommitting our staff on pre-recorded sessions for on demand or pre-recorded sessions for our semi-live. And then how many live sessions could the platform host well?
Meredith, let me just pause there for a second to make sure the listeners really appreciate the different styles that you presented content. You just mentioned them. So let's just go over the three main ones again and just talk a little about how they worked for you. So you started with live.
Right. Those are sessions with speakers that are talking from their homes and they literally just go live with their presentation. DIA team, the staff person in their virtual room, would bring up the slide deck for those speakers and would remote share access to the speakers. And, you kept your fingers crossed and you hoped there was no challenges with their Wi-Fi or their connection to the platform. And they presented in real time and they did Q&A with the audience in real time. The next type was a semi-live. And these were sessions that were pre-recorded. Most of our sessions have an average of 3 to 4 speakers in them. And so we scheduled them to record as a group in a Zoom room with their slide decks. And that recording was then uploaded to the platform. And after the video ended, so about 45 minutes into their session time slot, there would be 15 minutes of Q&A with the audience, and that part was live. So that's why it was called a semi-live. And all the speakers were invited to participate in that live Q&A.
Got it. And then you had the...
On demand. Yep. And that was just solely pre-recorded. There was no live Q&A component to it. And it was made available within the program agenda for folks to go through at their own time.
And then you also had a trade show.
Yes,
and
we
poster
had.
rooms, right?
I started calling it the poster gallery or poster boards 2.0. So we had this whole module for the posters, and the poster presenters uploaded a PDF of what their printed poster would look like. So that was their virtual poster board. But then they could also upload a small self-recording, so like a 3-minute recording of themselves with PowerPoint slides. They could upload handouts as well. So they had this opportunity for supplemental material that we didn't have in the in-person version. So that was nice for them. And then there was the virtual exhibit hall, which was also a little bit, different. It was like a gallery style, and you would click on the company logo, and there would be a splash page that would be the exhibit booth, and you could talk to representatives. There was a way to make appointments. We also had peer-to-peer networking opportunities where folks could make appointments in general. So attendees could do matchmaking and request appointments with other attendees or exhibitors. We had that feature. The networking lounges were great for folks to drop into and see people because it was a camera. You could put your camera on and, connect in that manner. So I was pretty happy with what we were able to accomplish in a short period of time, really leveraging all these different facets of a virtual platform. So this was more than a webinar, in other words.
I have two really pressing questions that I've been dying to ask you even before we agreed to record this, which was, have you dug into your numbers yet? And we've talked before about how you didn't have these kinds of numbers available to you, the data, how long people stayed, how many showed, where they went. You wouldn't have been able to capture that in a live situation. Have you had a chance to dig in yet? And what are you seeing?
So, not to disappoint, haven't had a true chance to dig into the data. We do have this dashboard that Freeman has provided to us. And we're actually still collecting data because we are allowing folks to visit the platform up until August 14th for sessions that they weren't able to see. But to be honest, just based on what I was seeing in the session rooms and seeing the amount of engagement via the chat features, I'm pretty happy. Folks, for the most part, stayed. And when I watched the numbers of the session, they always peak. About 10 minutes in, you pretty much have your highest number. Drop-off was minimal with folks clicking out. Now, as far as staying engaged, I hope to see more of that in the data. Going into this, I knew that screen fatigue and distractions are very real and very different than the in-person meeting where folks think maybe twice before they get up and leave a session.
Right.
Here, you could easily turn away from your screen, walk out, or have family that you need to interact with. So looking forward to seeing more of those numbers, but I was happy with the session attendance overall. The rooms did pretty well for this.
So I'll look forward to hearing more on the data side, just because it's the first time you get to really dig in. The second part of my original question, which I'm now going to go back to, which was the pivot of the speakers. And you and I had a little bit of collaboration on this, and we appreciate our role in a very small part of helping your speakers get ready. But how did it go? I mean, in terms of when you take a look at the collective presentations and, you've got technology that can be both a support and a barrier. And then you've got speakers who are more ready than others and who are good speakers to begin with and not so good. Just kind of give us a rundown on how you think that went for them from their perspective.
Sure. But I do have to say, I appreciate your participation too. And the help that you gave our speakers. And now I'll elaborate on what that was.
Thank you for that.
So anybody, in my opinion, who goes into a virtual meeting pivot and just focuses on the technology side of it and what the platform can do and how many sessions you can host is missing out on a major component. And that is your speakers and your session chairs. and how much manpower you actually need to allocate to your rooms. This is different. This is very different than going to the convention center, accessing your meeting room, and walking up to the podium. And so we felt not only did we need to create resources that explained what this platform is, like what are you walking into, what are you agreeing to, and what can you expect? So there was that whole side of it to explain. But then there was making sure that my speakers were as knowledgeable and ready as possible for how to give a presentation in this format. And so that was everything from what we worked on with the speakers when you were in Acacia, we're teaching them about speaking and different tones in their voices, to the pacing that you talked about, interactivity and lead-in questions, and attention disruptors to make sure you have attention. Things that were important in the in-person, but were much more important in the virtual, because that's your only means now. We had cameras on, but the visual cues that the audience would be getting aren't as pronounced. And so there was that component, but then there was also you educating them on lighting and proper framing when it comes to using their camera. Being ready, what that doesn't just mean what you're wearing, but what's behind you.
Right.
All those little details. I will say on a happy note, we got great feedback from our techs at Freeman who were manning the speaker ready room, which is the go-to place for technical help for the speakers, that the speakers were more prepared than other speakers they've had before. But also, I can tell you from viewing different sessions, I saw a lot less forehead. So people were...
That makes me very happy.
They were looking at their cameras. And
everyone's gonna remember the find your camera and put your finger on it test.
And you could see that. And that webinar that we did for the speakers, which lived on and was accessible in our speakers corner, which is where we just have this resource library that we keep adding to. I truly believe people were viewing it even after the fact, even though we had a good turnout for the live. I think they went back or they accessed it later. And I could see that in the way they were presenting. There were some that were so good. I was cheering for them, just how confident they were going into it. We also, I think also messaging that you gave about being more concise and how you can only fit so much luggage, right? You can bring now with you, how much content you can pack into what you have to get across. The presentations, they came across really well. And I think it was apparent that we didn't take the square peg and try to put it in the round hole.
You mentioned the speaker ready room. Let's dig one level deeper on that, because I think that concept is super important for others who are hosting to think about. So the speaker ready room, so just define it for us and then how people got there and what did they do, when they were there?
The speaker ready room, when you're on site in an in-person meeting, is a place where speakers are told to go, check in, double check their slides, make sure they're happy, they're good to go. Their presentations would be shot to your room, to your session room, like magic. For the virtual meeting, I was happy that Freeman had a virtual version of it. And it wasn't so much to check in your slides, because we had all of that. Those slides were uploaded to a presentation management system. It was more for making sure you are technically ready to go. So it was, can you check my mic with me? Can you check my video with me? Can you tell me again how I have to have two screens up if I want to see in the Zoom room to present and also see the chat where the questions are coming in from the session, which is one of our big technical challenges. I would say hurdles was explaining that concept to the speakers and the chairs. So having the speaker ready room with Freeman Tech live and in person to interact and address those questions was a good thing. And I think it also gave comfort to my speakers and chairs to hear it from a more technical sound person than myself.
You're pretty technical.
I am now.
Trust me. I know. When could, I guess my only other question is, when could speakers check in? Anytime during the conference, 10 minutes before? Like, when did you want them to check in?
So we asked them to check in at the earliest one day before, because we didn't want to set you up and then have you touch or change a setting by accident.
Mm-hmm.
So at earliest one day before, I would say at latest it was 1 hour before, because a half hour before your session, we needed you to go to what we called the virtual green room. And that was a Zoom link. And you would click on that and it would bring you to an open Zoom room where the Freeman staff would literally would change your name to the number, or not change, add to your name the number of your session, and then funnel you to your Zoom meeting room, which was a Zoom breakout room.
So many moving parts. Oh my goodness.
I know.
So if you just take a deep breath and say, this is the big question we've been asking everyone, will you go back live after doing this? Did you reach more people in more places? I mean, you're a global organization. You reach 50 countries of, 50 nationalities of folks that come to you. Has there been conversation that this may be a good way to reach more people, or is it still missing that connection that you really want?
We absolutely view it as a way of reaching more people that in prior years could not travel, let's say, to the global annual meeting, and more so who may not be too comfortable traveling in the near future to an annual meeting. And so absolutely, yes. I think there's going to be a digital component to meetings. We're calling it a hybrid, where we're hoping to have an in-person side and a digital side to, again, bring that reach, to continue that reach. So we definitely are embracing the virtual meeting concept, as crazy as it was this time around. But I truly believe the crazy was the 6 to 7 weeks we had to pivot. Now that we've gone through it and we've experienced it and we know what it is, I think we'll be much better able to handle it.
If somebody came and sat in your living room and said, Meredith, I need to do the same thing you just did, what would be your advice to that meeting planner who has to pivot another huge conference?
Anything that comes to mind. My first thought was, how much time do you have?
Like something you wish somebody had told you. I wish somebody had told me that.
I wish in hindsight we would have pre-recorded more sessions, because in honesty, I think as lively as going live is, it has a little bit more edge to it when you think about it. It's also more risky than the semi-live sessions. And at the end of the day, I felt my semi-live sessions were just as lively as my live sessions. So to mitigate risk, it's also easier on the speakers, it's easier on the staff. Having it go semi-live with a playback and then having the live Q&A component at the end of it to supplement or to bring it the session whole, I think is definitely something I would do more of the next time around.
And I just have one other question we didn't ask about, but in hindsight, you started your conference the same dates that it was supposed to be. I mean, you kept true,
Yeah.
right? The June week was the week you had planned to do the live conference, and you kept essentially to the kind of day schedule. And would you think differently about breaking your content up or spreading it out or doing less next time if it was only virtual? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we had a conversation about the dates. Do we want to keep them? Do we change them? We decided, because we were already, at this time, it was, close to April. And again, we're a June meeting. We're on everyone's calendars. The amount of marketing that's gone into this conference and the availability of all the speakers being confirmed, we felt it was important to keep the dates. And we knew that meant more work on our end to make that happen. We didn't want to change everything. We just wanted to change one thing. And that one thing was the delivery, how we were delivering it. As far as the, whether it's a full day or half day, we looked at, do we do a few weeks. We know conferences that broke in half, that had part 1, part 2. We have conferences that instead of being 4 days, they went 6 days or longer. And we decided after, and this wasn't just an internal decision with our team, our staff, we actually, brought this before our program planning committee, which is the volunteer committee. They're my subject matter experts that provide and work with us in the content. And I said, hey, what do you guys think? And there's 60 of them. So it was going to be a good,
Yeah.
It was going to be a good poll.
Cross representation for sure.
And they said, no, we'd rather have the excitement of it being the 4 days that it traditionally is. So we kind of fell back on the fact that, okay, everything's recorded and you can go back to this platform up until August 14th. So if you needed to tune out or have, only spend part of your day with us, you could do that and not worry that you were missing something. And so we would suggest that in our newsletters to attendees about planning your day, take a look at our program, whatever you can't attend live, make sure you come back. And so I think that worked. I do. I honestly couldn't imagine doing this beyond 4 days. It's very intense.
I think that I didn't tune in to the virtual TED conference, but I think they went over 6 weeks. They did something like every day at noon. I mean, there's all sorts of different styles and modalities and timing and delivery. But I think your insights around, pre-recording and really using a platform that works best for your community, those two things I'm pulling away are really important to whoever might be thinking about how do I organize my own pivot.
And I will say this, because it did come up a few times within my own volunteer committee who wanted to know, how are we going to go about making this interesting? Again, that webinar kept coming up, making it more than a webinar. So how are we going to keep this interesting? That came up, and the hallway track, which is the networking. You can't just leave a room and bump into somebody and talk about what you just heard. What we did was we really evaluated what are DIA's truisms? What do people look forward to at DIA? What's a special DIA moment? And so we literally pushed ourselves to make sure we had those moments. So while the session content and all the different capturing options and organizing the 500 speakers was a major fire drill, we also made sure to have a stellar opening plenary. We had a wonderful musician, singer, songwriter who recorded himself in his own studio, at his home studio, songs for DIA. And so that was our walk-in music when you clicked into the opening. And that's our big, massive opening plenary where everybody goes. I mean, you had this live entertainer or recording of a live entertainer happening. And his music was just so upbeat and happy. We had our keynote. We had our honorary chairs do their messaging. So it was a very big start to the meeting. And that is how we would start the in-person meeting. So we had a really great kickoff, like a big boom to the virtual meeting. And then we made sure to keep sessions such as the community roundtables where you could click into a session room and see people. We wanted you to be able to see and have a conversation with a like-minded person. So making sure we kept that element. The networking lounges, that was truly a social experiment. We didn't know how this was going to go. It's a technology through the platform that I have no administrative controls over. And you just pop into a room and you see who's there, and then you just talk. And it has up to 50 people. So I did have a staff person in there who, kind of had starter questions in case there was awkward silences happening.
And were there any awkward silences?
No, they pretty much all worked out, which is so fun and a huge relief because my vice president was in one of those rooms. I was like, I hope this works. So, those kinds of moments. We even kept our philanthropy project where folks that clicked into the exhibit hall, for every click, a certain amount of money was donated to a local health and community center in DC.
What I'm hearing you say is back to the truisms. You really stuck to your mission and purpose and the things that made you, DIA. And when you do those things, then the virtual doesn't seem such a big pivot anymore, because you can lean back on those things that really give you joy and fill the mission and the drive of your goals and objectives.
Absolutely.
What you're kind of
Absolutely
trying to achieve. That's really good. So I'm going to say thank you to Meredith again for both your partnership and also your time today. I can't tell you how excited I was to hear your insights. You are on the front lines of probably one of the largest event pivots to happen in the last 3 months. So we appreciate your sharing your story with us.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and good luck to those planners who are making their pivots.
Hey, thank you so much for listening to the Do Tell Virtually podcast. We have a lot of others in our series if you're interested in how to become your best virtual self, whether you're a speaker, trainer, teacher, facilitator, or salesperson. You can also check out our website at www.articulationinc.com. That's the word articulationinc.com. Thanks so much for tuning in, and have a great day.